The indentured graduate. Why British professors view American student debt as a life sentence. Part 1. The Oxford professor's disbelief. Imagine spending your entire life in the historic, stone-walled libraries of Oxford or Cambridge. You are a senior professor of economics. To you, higher education is a sacred, intellectual rite of passage. It is a time when a young mind is supposed to expand, to question reality, to read deeply, and to figure out how to contribute to human progress. You believe that when a brilliant 18-year-old enters a university, their only anxiety should be passing their exams and mastering their discipline. You are Dr. Alastair Jenkins, an academic who views a university degree as an investment in the collective brainpower of society. In Dr. Jenkins' world, higher education is treated with a baseline of social dignity. Students might take out small, highly regulated loans for living expenses, but the repayments are pegged strictly to their future income. If they don't earn enough, they don't pay. The debt does not compound into a monster. It never defines their survival. Now, picture Dr. Jenkins flying to Boston, Massachusetts, to spend a semester as a visiting professor at an elite, prestigious American university. He is eager to meet the brightest young minds in America. He walks into his first seminar, looking at a room of eager, highly capable 20-year-olds. But as the weeks go on, Dr. Jenkins notices something deeply disturbing. These students aren't acting like young scholars. They are acting like exhausted, hyper-anxious day laborers. They are drinking 4 cups of coffee a day, pulling all-nighters, and running from classes to multiple part-time jobs. One afternoon, a brilliant student named Marcus comes to Dr. Jenkins' office to ask for an extension on an essay. Marcus is visibly trembling from exhaustion. Dr. Jenkins sits him down and asks what is wrong. Marcus breaks down and reveals the numbers. To attend this university, he had to sign a financial contract at 18 years old. He is currently carrying $120,000 in student loans, compounding at a brutal 7.5% interest rate. Every single morning, before Marcus even opens a textbook, he is mentally calculating the daily interest accumulating on his name. He confesses that he didn't choose his major out of passion. He chose it because an algorithm told him it had the highest corporate starting salary to prevent him from drowning after graduation. The British professor sat back in his chair, his mind completely paralyzed by the sheer, cold-blooded cruelty of the revelation. He went public on international academic forums, publishing a scathing essay that sent shockwaves through upper-middle-class American households. Dr. Jenkins wrote, "I have taught young minds for 40 years. What I am witnessing in America is not higher education. It is a financial slaughterhouse. You are forcing 18-year-old children to sign predatory financial contracts that would be illegal in any other consumer sector. You are placing a financial ball and chain around the ankles of your brightest youth before they even enter the workforce. It is an absolute psychological war zone. Why has America normalized a culture where the price of intellectual curiosity is a lifetime of financial bondage?" This devastating critique cuts straight through the superficial prestige of American ivy-clad campuses and hits the absolute, bleeding core of the American middle-class nightmare. It forces us to confront a terrifying reality that we have spent decades trying to dress up as opportunity. How did the American dream allow the pursuit of knowledge to become a disguised life sentence of psychological and financial terror? Part 2. The Global Observed, the Anomaly of the Penalized Mind. When Dr. Jenkins' observation was translated and debated across international academic and social networks, it triggered an avalanche of global commentary. Educators, parents, and young professionals from Europe, Asia, and Scandinavia looked at the financial balance sheets of American 20-somethings, and their collective reaction was a mixture of absolute disbelief, profound horror, and deep moral revulsion. To the rest of the world, the American student debt crisis is viewed as an absolute cultural pathology. We like to brag about having the world's highest-ranked universities, the most cutting-edge research facilities, and the wealthiest campus endowments. But the moment global citizens look at the human cost behind those shiny campus brochures, the illusion vanishes. They realize that America is the only developed nation on Earth that actively penalizes its citizens for wanting to become educated. Let us look at how citizens from Western Europe responded to the debate. In Germany, higher education is completely tuition-free, even for international students, because German society views an educated population as a public good, like roads or clean water. A German industrial engineer commented, "When I was 18, I went to a top-tier university. My tuition was zero. When I graduated, my net worth was zero, not minus $100,000. When I see American youth graduating with a debt size equivalent to a mortgage, but with no house attached to it, I feel like I am looking at a modern form of financial feudalism. You are starting your adult lives in a deep hole, serving corporate masters just to pay off the right to learn." Then came the commentary from the United Kingdom. Even though the UK transitioned to a tuition fee model in recent decades, their repayment structure protects the human being. A British civil servant noted, "In the UK, our student loans are managed by the state. You only pay back a small percentage once you cross a specific income threshold. If your salary drops, your payments stop. And after 30 years, the entire debt is legally wiped clean. The American system is a predatory trap. The interest rates are commercial, the debt compounds relentlessly, and it follows you to the grave. It is not a loan, it is a permanent tax on ambition." But the most cutting commentary came from Scandinavia. A Danish sociologist wrote, "In Denmark, the government pays students a monthly stipend, the SU, just to attend university because we want our young people to focus entirely on innovation and critical thinking." When we look at America, we see a society that treats its youth as profit centers. You are monetizing the anxiety of 18-year-olds. The psychological damage you are doing to your next generation of leaders will ensure that your society becomes increasingly anxious, risk-averse, and spiritually broken. This global consensus is a devastating reality check for the American identity. The international community no longer looks at American universities as centers of enlightenment. They look at them as high-end financial corporations that sell degrees as luxury commodities, leaving a trail of psychologically traumatized youth in their wake. Part 3. The Deep Dive, the Anatomy of the Tuition Hyperinflation. How did the American university system transform from an engine of social mobility into a multi-billion-dollar debt trap? Why does a bachelor's degree now cost more than a family home did 40 years ago? Where did this extreme systemic greed come from? The answer is not that American professors are paid too much or that textbooks are too expensive. The explosion of American tuition is driven by a toxic mix of the campus arms race, the corporatization of academic leadership, and a highly manipulative psychological narrative called the degree obsession. Let us break down the great illusion of the campus luxury complex. Over the past 30 years, American universities stopped operating as lean institutions of learning and started operating as luxury resorts competing for wealthy consumer dollars. Because young Americans were told from infancy that they must go to the best possible college to survive, universities realized they had an absolute monopoly on the youth market. To justify skyrocketing prices, universities began a massive, multi-billion-dollar construction war. They didn't spend the money on hiring better teachers or lowering class sizes. They spent it on building massive luxury student unions, state-of-the-art rock-climbing walls, Olympic-sized lazy rivers, gourmet dining halls with sushi chefs, and administrative palaces. The university transformed from a house of intellect into a consumer playground. And who paid for this luxury circus? The 18-year-old student, using cheap, unbacked credit provided by financial institutions that knew these loans could never be wiped out. This brings us to the second, most insidious mechanism of the American debt trap, the legal trap of bankruptcy exclusion. In America, if you are a reckless speculator and you buy a multi-million-dollar casino and go bankrupt, the law allows you to wipe your slate clean and start over. If you take out a massive mortgage on a mansion you can't afford, you can walk away and declare bankruptcy. But if you are an 18-year-old kid from a working-class family who takes out a loan to become a doctor or a teacher, the law strips away your right to bankruptcy. Under unique American financial regulations, student debt is virtually impossible to discharge in bankruptcy court. It is a financial shadow that clings to your Social Security number forever. It can garnish your future wages, it can seize your tax refunds, and it can even withhold your senior Social Security benefits. It is a debt that possesses more legal power than a debt owed to a cartel. It is designed, by law, to be a permanent extraction mechanism. The third driver is the explosion of administrative bloat. While the salary of the average adjunct professor in America has remained near poverty levels, the number of vice presidents, deans, diversity coordinators, marketing directors, and consultants has increased by over 100%. Modern American universities are governed by corporate executives pulling seven-figure salaries, whose main metric of success is increasing the university's revenue and protecting its brand image. The student is no longer a disciple to be mentored. They are a high-yield customer to be optimized for maximum lifelong debt capacity. Part 4. The culture of the anxious generation. To understand the true tragedy of this system, we have to look past the institutional spreadsheets and analyze the deep, generational deformation of the American psyche. We have raised an entire generation of young adults who are psychologically crippled by the weight of their own education. The constant, underlying threat of unpayable debt has completely warped the life milestones of modern Americans. For previous generations, your 20s and 30s were a time of bold risk-taking, entrepreneurial experimentation, marriage, and buying a home. For the modern indebted American, those milestones are a distant, unreachable fantasy. They are delayed indefinitely. We see a generation that cannot afford to move out of their parents' basements. They cannot afford to get married because combining two student debt portfolios feels like a financial suicide pact. They cannot afford to buy a home because their debt-to-income ratio makes them a pariah to mortgage lenders. They are living in a state of extended financial adolescence, frozen in place by a monthly bill that arrives like clockwork every single month. But the deeper tragedy is the destruction of human passion and public service. Think about the cultural consequence of forcing every smart young person into massive debt. If you graduate with $150,000 in loans, you cannot afford to become a public school teacher. You cannot afford to become a social worker, a local journalist, a legal aid attorney, or a primary care doctor in a low-income community. The debt forces the brightest minds of a generation to surrender their ideals and march straight into high-paying, soul-crushing corporate jobs. They become corporate defense attorneys, spreadsheet analysts for hedge funds, and tech optimization managers, not because they care about the work, but because they need the cash flow to service the monster. America is actively draining its society of public-spirited talent, turning an entire generation of idealists into highly efficient debt repayment machines for financial institutions. Part 5. The grand illusion of the meritocratic ladder. To maintain this highly extractive system, corporate university boards and financial media networks spend millions of dollars perpetuating a massive, manipulative cultural narrative. They call it the meritocratic dream. Every time a young person questions the astronomical cost of a degree, the cultural apparatus hits them with intense psychological gaslighting. Education is the ultimate equalizer. If you don't go to college, you will be left behind in the global economy. You will be stuck in low-wage service jobs forever. The investment is always worth it. Your debt is a sign of your ambition. This is the grand American illusion. It is a completely fraudulent narrative designed to turn a systemic shakedown into a personal moral obligation. Let us look at the actual facts and contrast them with this corporate scaremongering. First, let us analyze the myth of the college premium. The corporate narrative uses outdated data from the 1980s to claim that a college degree automatically guarantees a middle-class life. But today, we have a massive structural crisis called degree inflation. Because universities have mass-produced credentials to maximize tuition revenue, a bachelor's degree has become the new high school diploma. Today, you need a $100,000 degree just to get an entry-level job sorting emails in a cubicle for $45,000 a year. The degree is no longer a ladder to wealth. It is simply an incredibly expensive ticket just to enter the stadium of survival. You aren't paying for mobility. You are paying to avoid immediate poverty. Second, let us dismantle the illusion that the debt is your own fault because you chose a useless major. This is the favorite deflection tactic of the American media. They love to mock students who majored in history, philosophy, or art, claiming they deserve to drown in debt. But the data shows that this is an absolute lie. The crushing weight of student debt is felt by nursing graduates, engineering majors, architecture students, and public school teachers. When a society charges $60,000 a year for a nursing degree, but the starting salary of a nurse in a local hospital is $55,000, the math is structurally broken from the start. The issue isn't the choice of major. The issue is the systemic, predatory pricing of the institution itself. The system has successfully gaslit the victim into believing that their financial ruin is a personal moral failure, rather than a highly calculated corporate extraction. Part 6. The Professor's Final Verdict. When we look back at the profound disbelief of Dr. Alastair Jenkins, watching a brilliant 20-year-old student lose his sleep, his passion, and his youth to a predatory compounding interest rate, we have to realize that this is not an economic debate about funding models. This is a spiritual evaluation of a society's future. A nation's youth is its most precious natural resource. It is the repository of its future imagination, its scientific breakthroughs, its artistic genius, and its social conscience. If a civilization chooses to monetize that youth, if it decides to turn the very act of learning into a high-stakes financial gamble that ends in lifelong bondage, then that civilization is actively consuming its own future to feed its present greed. The modern American university system is performing exactly how it was designed to perform by the corporate logic that took it over. It has successfully turned the pursuit of truth into a high-yield financial product. It has trained an entire population to accept anxiety as normalcy, to mistake a corporate credential for wisdom, and to view a life sentence of debt as the price of admission to the human race. It is time for an absolute cultural rebellion. It is time for American parents, students, and workers to look past the Ivy League sports teams, look past the prestigious campus gates, and demand a complete dismantling of the higher education debt machine. We must refuse the normalization of the 18-year-old financial trap. We must demand a return to education as a public sanctuary, a place where human minds are cultivated, not harvested for interest payments. The rest of the world is looking at American higher education not with awe, but with absolute pity and deep, mournful confusion. They see our brilliant youth, chained to their desks, drowning in numbers, their dreams hijacked before they even begin. It is time to break the chains of the indentured graduate. It is time to turn the university back into a house of light, throw out the financial predators, and give American youth back their right to think, to create, and to breathe free.